Hello Summoners, and welcome back to another episode of ProGuides Best Champions to Main, now on patch 11.1. These champions are all about high performance, and low ban rates are unlikely to get nerfed in the immediate future, and the most reliable picks in the game that are most worthy investing time in. My name is Nathan Ng, and now without further ado, let's get started. Starting things off in the top lane, we'll be going off with Wukong. With the second armor it gives, his passive makes him a direct counter to AD bruisers that you generally run into the top lane as long as you take extended trades against them. Q serves as the core of your kit, where your pole kind of extends, your staff gets bigger. Size does matter, empowering your autos threefold, giving it bonus damage, increased range, and an armor shred. Since its cooldown goes down the more you auto, it also suits an extended trading pattern much like your passive. Once you max it out, the bonus range is long enough that you'll actually have a semi-range poke against other melee champions. Real quick, one thing I want you guys to know is that if you want to start the season off strong, we're actually giving you guys a 20% discount on our annual ProGuide subscription from the 8th to the 14th. You can use the link in the description down below and check that out. Now, more about the Monkey Man. W is where your outplay potential lies. You can press S to stand still and fake it, or actually use it and change the direction that you're walking in just to juke out your enemies. But it's not just used for running away from the bad guys. It can also serve as an extra gap closer with the stealth and mini dash helping you get the E range and jump on the enemy backline if they aren't paying attention. E's main function is to go in for trades and start up team fights, but that bonus attack speed also plays into the extended trades that we talked about before, since more attacks means shorter Q cooldown. Your ultimate gives you insane team fighting presence, and since it's both a large amount of flat damage and some damage based on your enemy's max HP, it can shred through just about any champion in that area. As a quick tip, try to position a bit away from your clone in team fights so your ultimate doesn't overlap, giving you the biggest area of effect possible. Like I said, Wukong's ult can give you insane team fighting presence. That brings us to today's question of the day. What ult do you find is the most satisfying? While huge AoE ults form champions like Wukong and Malphite can be part of some huge wombo combos, I honestly love Jin's ultimate. Being able to snipe people from afar and hitting every single shot is so satisfying. But that's me. I want to hear what you think in the comments down below. Our next pick is Shen, and while he may be technically a tank, he's still one that you pick if you prefer to beat down your opponents by forcing trades hard. In fact, he has more of a feel of a split-pushing duelist more than the feeling of his CC-heavy, engage-focused tank peers. Shen's Q gives him strong trading, allowing him to shred through squishies and tankier targets alike. But to really get the most out of it, make sure you're dragging the sword through your target for the slow, bonus damage, and bonus attack speed that it grants. This is super easy to accomplish if you use E to dash through your opponent and immediately use Q to call the sword to you, as your opponent is unable to dodge. But Shen's not just a great duelist because of his Q's damage. Between his passive shield and W ability to block autos, you should basically never lose a fight when you're taking it on your terms. Just remember, the W zone is around Shen's sword, not Shen himself, so you'll have to make sure that you're fighting near it. E's taunt may provide some CC, but with its short range, it's more of a trading tool than a way to engage team fights. If you're looking to fight a 5v5, you need to ult on a teammate that's already on an enemy champion, putting you in range to hit your taunt and lock them down for a kill. Speaking of your ultimate, that's really what pushes Shen over the line between good and really strong in solo queue. In the early game, it can really easily turn a fight around the bot lane, and its fights are always going to be in the bot lane. And since you use your ultimate, not your TP to join fight, you can recall, buy items, and use your summoner to get back to lane without missing out on too much farm. As the game goes on, you're able to split push, pressure side lanes, and even threaten inhibitors, and anytime somebody comes to match you, your team can force a fight, with their ultimate letting you to join in on the action, leading them on an easy 5v4 situation. To finish things off in the top lane, we have Sion. His massive health pool makes him an incredibly beefy target to shred through, but with this build, he also does a ridiculous amount of damage. Your Q gives strong control over the lane as it lets you shove waves when you want, and it can serve as a zoning tool against your enemy. If they even think about walking up to the wave to match your shove, and E into a charge Q can let you deal a huge chunk of damage that your opponent will be helpless to escape. Q can also be used to cheese from inside a bush. Simply back up like you're gonna recall to the tower, but loop around and enter the bush where the minion waves are crashing. When your opponent steps up confident that they can farm since they think that you're at base, line up a Q and charge it fully. W shield also helps to shrug off any laner's return damage in trades, but what really makes ability so strong is its passive. All that HP it gives you is what makes you such a huge behemoth to bring down, even when building damage. Even if your opponent is sitting back at range, using the E on a minion will give you a little bit of poke, but the main use of it will be for tagging your opponents with a slow and armor shred to make your follow-up Q easier and safer to land and deal more damage. Once you're 6, your ultimate will give you a way to force a fight hard, but it can be somewhat easy to dodge at close range. So instead of using it in your own lane, the best option is to go back, walk towards bot lane, and then use it when the enemy bot lane overextends. If you coordinate this with the team and they're able to lock down the enemy bot lane, this should pretty much always result in free kills and a dragon for your team. Outside of the laning phase, you can use your ultimate to engage fights, but you'll be looking to fight in the middle of the lanes or the rivers since it will be hard to stay your ultimate in the wall-filled jungle. Speaking of jungle, we're going to be going into the jungle, and our first pick is Poppy. You'll be running all damage in your runes, but pretty much building full tank. In case you haven't noticed the trend, tanks that deal a ton of damage are pretty OP. Poppy's passive shield may seem small, but over the course of a full jungle clear, it actually helps prevent quite a little bit of damage, leaving you with plenty of HP for ganking. Her Q also gives you really strong clear. The AoE damage makes the multi-target camps really easy, while the percentage-based damage also helps bring down the beefier single-target camps. When it comes time to gank, you'll always want to approach from an angle behind your opponent, forcing them into a wall with their escape route, so you can go ahead and stun them with your E. If you're ganking a champion with a dash, hold your W to block their escape rather than using it right off the bat for the movement speed. Your ultimate serves several purposes. When ganking, you'll want to use the quick tap version of it to layer the CC onto your target. You can also use it to disengage an enemy engage attempt, peel threats off your carries, or knock the enemy jungler back towards the base so you can scoop up an uncontested dragon or baron. When it comes to a team fight, Poppy can certainly dive into the enemy backline and cause some mayhem. But if your team lacks peel and the enemy team has champions like Shen or Zac that can jump out on your carries, consider hanging back and peeling with your W instead. If you prefer a super fast-paced gank-heavy jungler, consider picking up RekSai. Her Q's cleaving and powered autos will allow you to mow down the jungle camps fast, while her E's tunnel lets you make shortcuts as she goes camp to camp. This lightning-fast jungle clear means that she has more time to gank, and thanks to the aforementioned tunnels, those ganks can come from pretty much any angle, meaning that you can punish opponents for having fun and stepping off their tower for even a little bit. Her burrowed Q gives you a way to scout for enemies, so shoot it into bushes as you prowl around the map if you aren't doing anything else. W's knockup makes it basically impossible to flop ganks, since it's essentially an auto attack requiring you just to right click to CC your opponents. One thing that I'll never know is that it's basically never worth using your E until you can fill up your Fury bar all the way. Not only does it do double the damage, but it converts it to true damage. When your opponent flashes away to escape with the skin of their teeth, your ultimate will let you follow them and finish them off with its massive execute damage. Just be careful that you aren't chasing straight into a tower. RekSai is a super simple champ mechanically, which means pretty much all your results come from the correct jungle pathing and worrying about how to play to your strong lanes. If you struggle with a concept like that, don't worry, there are some that are most easily taught. Just go ahead and go over to ProGuides.com, where our top tier coaches would love to help you out with that and so much more. Our last jungle pick is Skarner. Already a strong pick last season, Skarner is even better now as he can build straight into triple chem tank instead of having to wait for his movement speed item and active later into his build as he had to do in Season 10. His Q gives you fast clear and also serves as your main DPS when fighting other champions. W shield gets a fair but much needed beefiness, but the real use of it comes from your movement speed, which lets you get into range to attack your opponent with the blue smite and your CCing abilities. Skarner's E is kind of an underrated ability. Most of the time you'll see Skarner throw out an E and just tunnel on one target, but if you do that you're wasting a lot of his potential. If you see that you hit multiple targets and champions, take the time to go target to target, autoing each one to apply the stun portion of the ability. Doing this 2 or 3 times in a fight makes a huge difference. Lastly, Skarner's ultimate lets you tactically outplay any carry that hasn't even picked up QSS. Activate Turbo Chem Tank, press W, and use your R to drag your target to your team. With this phase rush build, you can go ahead and kidnap somebody from the enemy team before they even have a chance to react. One quick tip about playing Skarner. The #1 rule is always fight in your spires, even when clearing the jungle. The mana regeneration equals more Qs, and that along with the bonus attack speed means you clear much faster, or tons of damage when fighting other champions, while the movement speed buff makes it super easy to stick to your targets. Next up, we have our mid laners, starting off with Neko. Her bursty combos allow her to chunk out your enemies, and can even serve as an engage when your team is lacking it from the other roles. You won't get much use out of her passive during the laning phase, but later on into the game, make sure that you use it often to keep your enemies guessing. Her Q is her main source of damage, but it's not really worth throwing it out to harass your lane opponent unless you root them with your E first, since it'll also allow you to wave clear. When farming, make sure you're using it to last hit so you can get 2 or even 3 pops out of it for max value. W's on-hit effect can actually do a lot of damage, but you won't really want to be in auto range of your opponent very often. More likely than not, you'll just want to use it to help you last hit. The active is a super useful tool, giving you tons of outplay opportunities on your opponent, whether that's using it to sidestep skill shots, escape from ganks, or juke back into your foes to take the fights to them. The ease route sets you to land up your Q and your ultimate, but the base route duration isn't high enough to guarantee your abilities will hit. In lane, make sure that you're casting it through minions to get a much longer route, ensuring your full combo hits the mark. Once you have your ultimate, your combo is all super deadly, but Neko's main focus isn't on solo killing. She really shines in teamfights where a multi-target ultimate should be all but guaranteed and easily won teamfight, if you do land it. If you prefer scrappier, almost bruiser-like gameplay, give Rumble a go. Possibly one of the most slept on champions in the past year, he's consistently been at a low play rate, high win rate, and there's no signs of changes to come. His Q provides constant AoE damage, giving him wave clear and even beats out ranged mages in the lane. and it's even better against melee champions who risk taking harass if they think about walking up to contest his push. W shield lets you shrug off damage from opponents who opt to push you out over to try to match you out in your wave clear, while your movement speed will let you chase out opponents when you're ready to fight. E slow really gives you some sticking power, but make sure you really have 2 charges available when you're looking for a more aggressive trade, as stacking the slow really makes a difference, leaving your opponents basically rooted as you roast them to death. The hardest part about piloting Rumble is to learn to cast its ultimate, but once you do, it's an insanely broken tool. You want to try to bait out the enemy team into fighting into a choke point where your ultimate can completely melt their HP bars. Early on in the laning phase, it can of course be used when you're fighting your laner, but if things are calm and you want a quick reset, don't be afraid to use it to instantly clear the minion wave and get a faster recall. Our last mid laner is Annie. If you prefer the point and click CC and the ability to one-shot targets before they even have the chance to fight back, she is the one for you. Her passive stun makes it insanely easy to set up ganks for your jungler, making her an extremely good pick if you enjoy dueling with a friend that likes to play that role. But even without that, everybody knows what Annie does, so simply communicate to your jungler that they should come to mid, and you should be able to pick up kill after kill. Q makes last hitting a breeze, since it refunds half the cooldown and all of the mana. You should, in theory, be able to get nearly every CS by using it in the right time. W's AoE damage lets you soften the wave to get each minion into Q last hit range, but there's also a neat trick when it comes to turning your focus to blasting champs over minions. If you W flash with it passive fully stacked, you'll be able to instantly stun your target. While the AoE isn't as quite as big as your ultimates, opponents with fast enough reflexes and really good ping can actually dodge tippers with their flash, so W flash is a pretty consistent way to get a pick on a single enemy. Your E's burst of movement speed will let you close the gap on opponents when you're ready to go in, or it gives you a little bit help when escaping from danger. In teamfights, giving it to your frontliners, especially like a bruiser like Olaf or Hecarim, can be huge, as the movement speed helps them engage, the shield keeps them alive longer, and any opponents auto-attacking them can take a pretty significant amount of damage with the Thorns effect. Lastly, Annie's iconic ultimate, Tibbers, gives you the ability to turn games into your team's favor in an instant. While we talked about the consistency of W Flash earlier when trying to pick on just a single foe, a Flash Tipper W combo into an enemy team is going to be pretty much enough to one-shot the entire backline. Swap your trinket out for a sweeper, go buy pink wards, and deny the enemy vision to look for those game-winning plays. Now with taking things into bottom lane, we're going to be talking about Twitch. Twitch's passive may seem like it does little to no damage, but after extended trades, those numbers really start to add up, and since it's true damage, it even chips away at the tankiest of enemies. But the real use of it is for the damage boost it gives to your E. With just a single stack, your E practically heals your enemies. But if you proc the press of the attack and max out your stacks, your E can do some massive damage, even in the early game. Q's camouflage can be good for escaping from danger, but more often than not, you'll be using it to get into position for a fight. In lane, it's pretty simple, but later on in the teamfight stages of the game, you'll want to put thought into how you position with your stealth. Since Twitch is completely immobile, you'll need to find a spot where you can open up, using the burst of attack speed from your Q and your ultimate's piercing damage to kill your opponents before they get a chance to react. After getting a kill, you can use your Q to reset to either reposition or just refresh the attack speed buff. A common misconception with Twitch is that he's a hyper carry with a weak early game. While he definitely has an insane scaling late game, Twitch doesn't necessarily have to be a weak laner. In fact, when paired with an aggro support, he can actually be a pretty strong pick. He pairs especially well with Braum since he can W to you as you stealth in on your opponents, and later in the fights, Braum can E and ultimate to keep you safe as you shred through your opponents. Next we have Drasana. Her passive lets her scale into a super high range carry in the late game, but you don't have to wait 30 minutes to pop off as Triss. Her early game damage is pretty crazy, and even with just a single kill, it's going to be enough to snowball a small lead into a complete win. Pretty much all of your potential comes from your E, so we'll talk about that first. You only want to fight when that's available, and getting it up to 4 stacks is key, as it not only does max damage, but also resets your rocket jump that way. Thankfully, with Halo Blades and your Q's attack speed steroid, that shouldn't be a problem at all. W lets you jump in and out of fights as you need, as long as you can get the resets for it. Once you have range from your passive at the late game, you won't really need to jump into fights, but you can still use the resets to constantly reposition for a better firing angle. One really nice thing is that due to the cast time, you can actually use Drasana's jump to buffer most CCs. For example, if you cast W right as Blitzcrank's hook is about to hit you, you'll actually finish the cast after being hit, causing you to leap to safety anyway. Your ultimate can give you a massive burst of damage, especially early game. In fact, as soon as you hit 6, you can go ahead and kill the squishy targets from full health if you jump on them, get an E into 3 stacks, and ult to apply the final stack. One quick tip if you're going to go aggressive with Drasana: when you're looking to go all in, make sure you're casting your E onto targets as you're traveling in with your W. The E will apply before you land, and once you do, you'll apply free bonus stacks on the explosive charge. The slow will make it impossible for them to escape between your 3 autos, and you have a guaranteed 4 stack E, and your jump will reset. Our last bot lane pick isn't the standard ADC, but instead a mage in Heimerdinger. His playstyle of constantly pushing in enemies and poking them under tower makes it really easy to tilt them, and causes them to play right into your hands. His turrets give all of that pushing power. It's as easy as figuring out good turret locations, placing them down, and letting them do the rest. While they shove in the waves, they aren't necessarily best at last hitting, especially early game when you don't have much AP, so you're gonna have to practice that with your auto attacks, which are incredibly slow. Your W is your main source of damage for most of the time, unless your opponent are repeatedly running into your turret's range, so that's what you'll be maxing. Early game, this will give you a decent amount of poke, but once you get more points into the ability and pick up a little bit more AP, it turns from a decent poke into a massive chunk, with just a couple of rockets being enough to send someone back to heal. It can be tempting to throw out your E for more harass, but don't be too liberal with it. Once you throw it out, you no longer have your disengage tool. Instead, your game plan should be something like this. Let your turrets shove in the waves, then use your W to poke your opponents out. If your opponent tries to engage or the jungler comes to help, run to your turrets and then use your grenade to stun your opponents. This will instantly prime your turret's lasers. If your W is up, hitting all 5 rockets on a target, which should be easy once they're stunned, your turrets will go ahead and shoot out the 2 rounds of lasers, which can do enough damage to easily turn the 2v3 into an easily won fight for you. Once you're 6, your ultimate gives you some choices, but here's a general guide of how to use it. If the enemy team has melee champions that are diving into your team, use your Q, as a mega turret has some huge DPS in extended close quarter fights. If the enemy team is mostly ranged and sitting back in fights, you need to engage, or you just want to layer your CC on your allies, Ult E is the better choice. You pretty much don't want to use your ultimate W, since it's pretty hard to reliably land all the rockets in most cases, but when you do, it can do an insane amount of burst damage. Just make sure that your target is logged down by CC for long enough. Finally, let's talk about the support options, starting with Lulu. With her passive, Lulu excels at both tit for tat auto trades and extended fights, thanks to Pixie's extra attacks. In later fights, throwing Pix on a high attack speed ally can be a huge boost to their damage. Q gives you a little bit of poke and lets you help your ADC with shoving their lane when it's time to go back for a reset. The slow can also provide a bit of appeal for your team. W may be a basic ability, but in my opinion, it's by far the most broken part of Lulu's kit. The attack speed can give hyper carry even more DPS, while the movement speed can make an otherwise immobile champion practically untouchable. It can also be used to speed up champions like Hecarim or Olaf that want to stampede into the enemy team. Alternatively, it can be used to fully shut down fed opponents, so don't just mindlessly spam it on your ADC if the other team has a fed champion diving into your backline. Early game, you might want to use your E a little bit more aggressively, casting it on your opponent to deal more damage, but as the game goes on, you want to generally just stick to using it on your allies to keep them alive and buff them with Ardent and Staff of Flowing Water. There is one trick that you can actually do with it. If your opponent is really low under tower but doesn't seem to be recalling, start to walk away. Put your E on a minion that's about to crash into the tower, and you may be able to get a free kill with your Q from that range with the minion if the low HP foe hasn't realized it. Granted, this doesn't do too much damage, but you know, it's kind of a cool thing you could do. Like your W, you can actually have a couple of options with Lulu's ultimate. Most of the time, you'll be using it to either peel for a carry, with the knockup and subsequent slow aura making it easier for them to escape danger. But don't just save it for the ADCs. Sometimes the better option is to throw it on your tanks or bruisers. The knockup can add a layer of CC to your front lines engage, with the slow aura giving them some extra sticking power. Next, we have another enchanter with Janna. While it's not the flashiest or most noticeable thing in the game, the movement speed Janna grants to her allies can actually help them kite back towards her in team fights. When a jungler is lane ganking for you, try to be mindful of that and try position accordingly. Even at rank 1, Janna's Q can do a ton of damage if fully charged, so it can add a lot of wave clear and even add poke if you hit it on the enemy laners, but that's only recommended against more passive lanes. Against more aggressive lanes with kill pressure, set on your Q's cooldown until your opponents try to go in, and then use it to disengage. W gives you a point-and-click way to whittle down your opponents and synergizes extremely well with the Imperial Mandate. While most Enchanter players tend to plant themselves into the lane and glue themselves to their ADC, make most of their W passive movement speed, and roam to place wards for deep vision or to show up fights elsewhere on the map. Nothing is quite as tilting as a support gap turning a 2v2 mid lane fight into an unfair 3v2 or a 2v1. Each shield helps keep your allies alive, but even if they aren't taking damage, you'll want to put it on your ADC when you're attacking their foes. At max rank, this gives basically a BS sword worth of AD, and if you opt to build an even more AP heavy build over the standard healing build, then you can easily raise that bonus AD to over 100. Generally speaking, Janna's ultimate is really easy to use, but there are a couple of tips for it. For starters, don't just go using it immediately and run away. Many Janna players tend to press R to disengage and retreat, especially in 2v2 situations. But if you actually fully channel it, you'll heal your team a lot, and you can use it to turn the fights in your favor. Also, if the team have champions that want to jump into the fight, like Zac, you can use it to time your ultimate and swap them away. Just be vigilant and they'll never be able to reach your backline. Finally, rounding out our list, we have Alistar. For those of you that prefer the engaged fights and want to get in the fray rather than helping from the backline. When you're playing Alistar, there's no room for 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You're either all in or not fighting at all. His passive gives him a little bit of sustain, a rare commodity for melee engaged supports. While not being super significant, it can help him and his lane partner be healthy enough to take fights when the opportunity arises. On their own, your Q and W can provide disruption and peel in fights, but most of the time you'll be using it together, with W serving to close the gap and Q allowing you to throw your opponents into the air. As your opponents go airborne, you'll be wrapping up with your E. Once it fully stacks up, then Powered Auto gives you even more damage and CC. If you're able to pull off that full combo and your ADC isn't asleep at the wheel, it should be a hard-won trade, if not an outright kill. Your ultimate's damage reduction lets you absorb ridiculous amount of damage that you can basically tank turrets. So don't be afraid to call your jungler for a dive. One big mistake I see really often with Alistar players is their timing when using their ultimate. A lot of the time they use it when they're already under 10% HP, as if they're playing Zillion or Tryndamere. Instead, you want to use it when you're about to take a huge burst of damage, usually right at the start of the fight. You could also cleanse, so go take that into account. In teamfights, once you're done with your initial combo and your ultimate runs off, you might just become squishier and easier to kill. At this point, consider backing up and playing peel for your ADC. And that's gonna be it for our best champions to main on 11.1. I hope you guys enjoyed this video because I am currently dying right now as I'm voicing it. But you know, gotta get this information out there. Gotta save your elo, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, if you like it, be sure to sub and never miss out on our meta guides so you're always in the loop on what the best picks are. Remember to let us know what ultimate you find the most satisfying in the comments down below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description. You can enter a giveaway from there or just hang out and be part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, and until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.